Okay, so I'm going to quickly run you through your just lab report stuff since we weren't in class on Wednesday. So the first thing that we did in lab was did the interviewing activity where you had the opportunity to interview one of your classmates where you would just practice interviewing skills and techniques. So I would encourage you to read through all of the interviewing skills information within your lab packet because that is everything that was on the presentation. So please read through all of this in the lab packet, especially the Solaire stuff. And so after you've read through all of that, and you can do the activity with someone else if you'd like to, for your lab report, you are going to need to answer this question here, which asks you to explain the aspects of interviewing that you find challenging and identify things you can do or focus on to help you overcome these challenges. And so please try to identify 2 to 3 things that you find challenging about interviewing, and then at least 1 or 2 sentences to support each challenge that you come up with, or 2 to 3 ways to overcome those challenges. And then so what that leads into, the interviewing practice leads into the second part of the lab where you are going to choose an individual. It could be an acquaintance or someone that you already know as your client, and you are going to interview them about their physical activity history, their needs, their struggles, things like that. And that interviewing guide, I believe, is either lower or higher. I think it's up here. So this is your interview guide, and you're just going to walk them through this interview guide. And using the information that you find out, you are going to create an exercise adherence program for them. And so what's important to distinguish here is that this is an exercise adherence program, not necessarily a workout program. So you're going to identify ways that you will help them adhere to exercising, not necessarily a workout routine. And so you are going to need to do these 3 things to be successful. So it offers you, under part 4, it offers you 3 things, sort of 3 guidelines for this second portion of the lab report. So, you'll identify their needs, choose one type of exercise adherence strategy that we learned about in class, and then you'll design a specific strategy of that type for them to use. And so those strategies you can find right here. Feel free to just pause and read the slides as they come. So you'll have behavior modification, prompts, and contracting. You will have reinforcement strategies, and you can use any of those if you're going to use reinforcement. When it asks you to choose one specific type, you could say that your type of strategy is reinforcement, and then you can use multiple strategies within reinforcement if that makes sense. Like if you decide to choose behavior modification, you can use both prompts and contracting, or just one. It's totally up to you. You can do cognitive behavioral. If you're going to use SMARTS goals, you need to make sure that you address each letter in that SMARTS acronym. And then for dissociation versus association, one important thing to note there is if you're working with a former athlete who, for whatever reason, has found trouble being physically active, you probably want to use association techniques, because athletes, when they usually work out, have been trained to associate the activity that they're doing with the sport. So what that means is when athletes go out onto the field or the court, wherever that may be, they associate with the types of things that result from training hard. So the pain, the burning, the struggle, things like that. They usually are not wearing headphones when they train with their teammates. And so that's why you want to use an association technique for former athletes. Whereas with individuals who maybe are not competing, you can use dissociation techniques where they listen to music, headphones in, things like that, to dissociate from any unpleasant feelings that they might have while being physically active. You can use decision making, but again, I would steer away from this, and that's because if you have an individual who is not traditionally physically active or unmotivated, they're going to load up on the cons list, and it's just not going to work out the way that you want. You can choose social support techniques, and then you can also choose intrinsic approaches. And so any of those major techniques, so intrinsic, social support, etc., pick one, and then you can use any combination of those within each one. Would be my recommendation for a more successful adherence program. So for your lab report, then you'll see there's that A, B, and C for that second part of the lab report after you've interviewed your client. And so what I would really encourage you to do is just be very detailed in that part A, because that's the background, and you're going to really need that background information to more fully be able to answer part B, where you actually describe the intervention that you're going to use. Again, read through the directions, make sure it is personalized to your client's situation, and you must be specific about what you are going to do based on their individual information. It's really important that you use that individual information, because I've had students in the past that have a great technique, but it's not relevant to the background information, or they just didn't provide enough background information. So really make sure that you get a lot of detailed information in that background portion. And then finally, for part C, you'll identify 2 challenges that you think your client may face in executing the intervention, and then come up with ideas to help overcome those challenges. And so what I would encourage you to do is, for that second portion of the lab report, when you do this, please separate those as part A, B, and C, as opposed to writing a huge or 2 huge paragraphs. Labeling those A, B, and C would really help me in terms of identifying where things are at, especially if you decide to cross over. It's hard for me to distinguish if you fully wrote out the background information and things like that. So if you could separate those, I would really appreciate that, and it would help me out a lot. So that's the second part. That is the second part of the lab, along with the first part where you just answer those questions about interviewing. And so, to recap, you will be reaching out to an acquaintance or someone that you may, or if you try to, may not know, and you're going to run through the interview guide that I showed you earlier, gathering all that information, and then you will create an exercise adherence program for them using one of the adherence techniques that I just showed you in that PowerPoint presentation. So you will have 2 weeks to complete this lab report, and that's going to be due by 9:30 a.m. on Friday, 2 weeks from now, since you guys had, you got started a couple days late. I will answer any and all questions about this on Wednesday. And so with that, I want to also remind you that your feedback lab presentations are this coming Wednesday. So please send me those presentations, the night before would be preferable, but any time before the lab works. With it being at 9:30 in the morning on Wednesday, the night before works best, but if you, just forget and send it to me, right before class, that's okay too. So that's all that I've got for you. Enjoy your weekend, and if you have any other questions before Wednesday, feel free to shoot me an email, and I will be available to help you out. All right, thanks everyone.